Hi folks, this is All the Fruit, and today I'm exploring and foraging in and around the little town of Drianovo in the Balkan Mountains in Bulgaria. Well, while I'm near the construction site in the center, observe those beautiful old Cercis siliquastrum trees. This is one of the bigger ones I've seen, and even those are quite old. Drianovo is one of those small mountain towns in Bulgaria which were heavily industrialized because, well, there was quite a tradition in handicrafts and trades here in those little towns, but the agriculture was never very promising. Here, by the way, an evergreen laurel cherry, it's native to this part of the Balkan Mountains, and an albizia tree which started to be grown here only after the climate change. So they were heavily industrialized during communist time. Now most of the industry is gone, while my nearby town of Driavna has some quite decently developed tourism. Drianovo, Drianovo has lost quite a lot of its population, but the remaining people, with the help of European subsidies, are keeping the town more or less in shape. So let's see what we can find around here. Feral cherry trees. Probably somebody spit a couple cherry seeds here and then the gardeners let them grow. Don't know how good the fruits are, because this year there will be almost no fruits in many parts of Bulgaria, because there was a heavy frost in April that killed the flowers, that killed the blossoms on the fruit trees. And here a feral cherry plum, which was probably also from a seed somebody spat out here. It is interesting that everywhere I go in Bulgaria, well, the parks and gardens are quite decently well maintained, but despite us having been in the EU for 18 years now, they still have the same ornamentals they had 40 years ago when I was a kindergartner. Was I a kindergartner 40 years ago? I lied to you, it was 45 years ago. There is just a handful of new ornamentals which have been introduced since then, maybe 5 or so, but 90% or more are still the same stuff I know from the 70s and 80s. An old pear tree here, some less than healthy looking cherry trees, and in the background there is something new. Those are some new blackberry and raspberry varieties, not the traditional ones grown here for a long time. Mouse barley, or a version of it. If you have a dog, don't let it sniff around those things. Very bad for the dog's paws and ears and lips and so on. This little thing can kill a dog. Oh, and look at that, there is a skeleton here right next to it, although I think that it's rather a cat, or probably a cat skeleton, not a dog. Oh, here is the dog, looking dangerous. And strawberries and grapevines and Virginia creeper growing around the dog. Interesting, here is a slightly more lively part of town with an old grapevine, another old grapevine behind it. I've seen already 4 or 5 grapevines and not a single American fox grape, which is very interesting because in Driavna nowadays 90% or 80%, let's say, of the grapevines are fox grapes. Let's find out why 2 towns less than 10 miles apart have such different grapevines. In the middle of the street there is a cherry plum with red leaves, an ornamental variety, but they are just as edible as the green-leafed ones. Cotoneaster horizontalis, very meager foraging, tiny fruits tasting like very boring apples, but with some luck you can forage them in any month of the year, so it's still a valuable resource to know. Speaking of valuable resources, I remember that I'm a man with a mission today. I have to collect yarrow and thyme and maybe even St. John's wort for my old teacher. However, I told her that it's very difficult to find thyme nowadays. Oh look, the old man's beard has taken over this ornamental shrub and this wall and fence also. Very difficult to find thyme nowadays. Yeah, also very difficult to find thyme nowadays, but I'm talking about the thyme from the Scarborough Fair song. No, actually it's not even the one from the Scarborough Fair song. It's a different thyme I'm looking for. Here, mellow, edible, wild lettuce, cabbage thistle, all of them edible. Curly dock, also edible. And here hops used for beer brewing. And behind the hops there is an orchard in the churchyard. Let's see, 1 quince, several plums, an apricot, the slightly older trees in the background, a cherry plum and a couple cherries and another cherry plum, and not a single one of those trees has a single fruit. This is a historic church, I guess from the 18th or 19th century. Actually the most important Bulgarian architect and builder from this period comes from the town of Drianovo, but it seems he didn't build too much in his own town. It was too small and poor, but the church looks really nice. Here a feral mulberry. Feral seedling mulberries often have those leaves that look a lot like fig leaves, while the ones grown from cuttings around here usually have more entire leaves. Don't know how to get into the churchyard. I've never visited this church before. There is a bit of a rivalry between Triavna and Drianovo. They are both situated on the same river. We call it the Triavna river, here they call it the Drianovo river. Apparently the river doesn't have a really official name, but both names are kind of semi-accepted. Also, we are towns of about the same size, had basically the same history and economy all the time. Only, well, Triavna is just Bulgarian. Drianovo has a couple minorities, Turkish and Roma people, a lot of them. Why? Well, because the Muslims in the previous centuries, they were the ruling class, and so they would go to the areas with better agricultural land. Triavna in the mountains, cold and bad agriculture. Well, here Drianovo, slightly further down into the lowlands, slightly better agriculture and climate. Let's see, but this difference of a couple kilometers might also mean a difference of a week or two, so all those herbs which are flowering right now in Triavna might have already stopped flowering here. Well, wild garlic. We never foraged those. We grew garlic and onions and leeks in our gardens. We never foraged the wild garlics and onions and leeks around here. We did forage wild mountain garlic, and in the areas where there was burr leek in the lowlands we also foraged it, but around Triavna I don't remember us foraging any onion relatives. And around here, yeah, everything on the ground looks a bit drier and the season looks a bit more advanced. Goji berries, and there are even a couple fruits. We were always told in Bulgaria as well as in Germany that those are toxic, but they were quite popular as ornamentals. Nowadays they are considered a superfood, but the taste is not so super. Those were most probably planted along this main road as ornamentals decades ago. Not gonna find any of the herbs I'm looking for around here. This area has been largely taken over by black locust from North America, which is highly invasive and also fertilizes the ground a lot, which is basically kind of good for agriculture. But a lot of those herbs which rely on poor soil and little competition will not grow in areas overrun by the black locust. So nope, no herbs around here. Well, nah, only really nitrogen loving plants under the black locust. The black locust is very poisonous, but the flowers are considered edible and also produce a very good honey in huge amounts. Well, they produce nectar and the bees make honey out of it. A guy told me, actually the flowers are toxic, but you can make them into a very good brandy or alcohol. You mix them with sugar and ferment them. But I know many people have been eating them regularly, so I don't think they are poisonous. Also here some of the nitrogen loving plants. 2 elderberry species here. In the background we have Sambucus nigra, the standard elderberry shrub of Europe. It has finished flowering. It flowered later, I guess, so that the flowers did not get destroyed. And it will have berries. You can eat them after processing. You can also eat the flowers or make many drinks from flowers and fruits. Oh, this was a big forest pigeon. They used to be quite rare in Bulgaria because unlike the city pigeons, they were popular for hunting and eating. Huh. Well, not many hunters left, so even those pigeons come back. Well, elderberry in the background. The elderberry in the foreground, Sambucus evolus, is actually a herb, a perennial herb. It dies back to the ground every autumn. It used to be considered incredibly toxic, but now some studies have said that it's not toxic at all and you can eat it. But we are still not sure, so be on the safe side. I mean, which study are you going to believe? The ones that says that this is the most toxic elderberry, or the one that says, yeah, you can eat it, no problem? I advise a walnut tree. Those were the most important, well, those are the most important nuts in Bulgaria and in most of Europe. In the Mediterranean, maybe you would say the almonds are the most important nuts, but in temperate areas of Europe, those are the most important ones. Apart from them, there are hazelnuts, wild ones and foraged ones. Look at that here, a couple cherry plum flowers have survived and they've produced a couple cherry plums. This is amazing. I mean, I was really scared in a year where even the cherry plum flowers freeze and there is no, when all the other, I'm not gonna get them, they're a little bit high, and also let's leave them for the animals. The animals are starving without fruits right now. Often in parts of Europe you have a harsh spring frost, or maybe it's very wet and rainy in spring. Fruit trees don't get pollinated apart from the cherry plum. The cherry plum, one of the ancestors of our domesticated plums. Here, by the way, a feral apple tree. Here is the feral apple tree, and some hawthorn and some cornel cherry, all with edible fruits. Well, look at that, no horse carts allowed. Not many horse carts left in Bulgaria, but it seems there are still signs. Usually the Roma nowadays are the only ones who still have horse carts, and apparently they are not allowed in this part of the town. Well, what I wanted to say, cherry plums are like a wheat and they are very resilient, so even if all the other fruit trees, their flowers freeze or don't get pollinated in spring, often the cherry plums will save not just the day but the year. And a fruit which is normally mostly used for making brandy will be used for eating out of hand, for making jams, preserves, compotes. Here, by the way, a quince shrub. I guess there was an orchard here with the quince tree, and it fell down and then a shrub grew from the base. Well, usually the cherry plum saves the year, but in this year even the cherry plum are not gonna save it. Another tree which might escape the frost is the white mulberry tree. The Romans used to call it Morus sapiens because it usually develops as flowers and leaves after the frost, later than the other trees. In this case, this year the mulberries also got hit pretty hard in many areas, but not as hard as the other trees. So you see there are a couple fruits on the ground. Oh, yeah, it's one of those standard white-fruited white mulberries, sweet, but not a trace of sourness. However, it has mulberry flavor. It's a bit bland. And then the black fruited varieties, they are usually sweet and sour, but with less flavor and with a different flavor. Oh yeah, here the season is more advanced. Yeah, around Driavna, the blackberries are all fruiting, all flowering right now. But here you see they already have young fruits. Yeah, and the grass is a lot drier here, so I'm sorry, teacher. Oh, look, a broken bird's egg. Usually the birds, after the chicks hatch, they will bring the eggs a little bit further away so that predators don't get a hint where the nest is. Amorpha fruticosa, it's called the false indigo. Looks like the black locust, but it's very smelly when you rub it. Used to be a very popular ornamental and also planted along railroads and roads because it was very resilient and to stabilize slopes, and it flowers quite nicely in spring. But now it has become invasive, not as bad as the black locust, which it resembles a lot, but still it's a problem. Also old man's beard, which is very much hated in parts of North America and New Zealand and other areas. It's native to Europe, that's why it's often not considered invasive and the problems with old man's beard are not being seen. While it's native to most European countries, it's not native to every European habitat and it's not so prevalent in every European habitat. But now, with the abandonment of a lot of gardens and industrial areas and quarries and so on, it spreads everywhere and it covers a lot more area than it's supposed to originally, and yeah, it can be quite detrimental to the vegetation and of course also to the animals depending on this vegetation. Okay, this roadside here is not that interesting. Also, well, today I had to come here to pay taxes, to pay 10 euro of taxes for 3 years for 2 people, and I actually wanted to go to the forest hunting for mushrooms. It's kind of mushroom season right now, but around here I will not find any edible, usable mushrooms. Oh well, here is something interesting. The horse hoof mushroom growing on a dead walnut tree, I guess. I'm not 100% sure here. All the trees look a little bit different from Germany, and the bark of some trees looks slightly different, but I think it's a walnut tree. This is not an edible mushroom, but it's used to make, it's used as a tinder. It's the tinder mushroom. You can basically make a spark. If the spark lands on the mushroom, this mushroom will glow consistently for many hours, so that you have a lot of time to light your kindling with the help of this mushroom and start a fire. This harvesting, processing, and distributing this mushroom used to be a very big industry in previous centuries, before we had matches and lighters and stuff. Oh yeah, and the elm trees in Europe. Elms used to be some of the biggest trees in Europe. There are still huge elms here and there, but nowadays a lot of them are dying at a very young age. See the trails of those bugs here. Those bugs also bring a fungus. The bugs harm the elm. Oh, look at that. Minority report. Here are our minorities with the horse cart, living their best life. Beautiful white horse. So nice. Yeah, used to be a very common sight when I was young. Now it's gotten rare. They are checking out the foreign tourists, and they are getting water from somewhere. So I guess maybe those are still some nomads. They used to be nomads in previous centuries. Most of them did not have permanent housing, and I guess since they are getting water, either they are not well supplied with water where they have their house now, or those are still some nomads. When I was young, they would travel around with such horse carts and with black Bedouin tents, like in the Sahara Desert. I guess now most travel around in caravans, but the poorer ones still have horse carts. This stuff doesn't need, the horses don't need gasoline. You can repair most stuff about the horse cart with your bare hands. And a lot of those old horse breeds, they don't even need fodder, but they will eat what they can forage along the roadside. Yeah, I totally respect them for that lifestyle. Here an old mulberry tree, and look at that. The whole road is covered with crushed mulberries. Yeah, those were introduced here not for the fruits but for the leaves. You would feed the leaves to the silkworm, and the silkworm would produce silk in return. And of course, you would also eat the fruits, but there were so many mulberry trees that you couldn't eat all the fruits. You made them into brandy and jams and other preserves and stuff. Here another old mulberry tree, so I guess there was a whole mulberry garden here for the silkworm production. Yeah, good stuff. Let's cross this quick road without getting run over. Forage a couple mulberries. Here they are hit less hard than in Driavna, like very short distances from here to Driavna, and very subtle differences, like yeah, here the mulberry trees were not hit that hard by the frost. Quite a good one. Not as aromatic as the white varieties, but this is a pretty sweet variety. Very little sourness, which is a pity because okay, I had very ripe fruits at the first handful. In the second one, there was more sourness. Nice balance between sweetness and sourness. Some animal got run over here. What is it? Looks like a chupacabra. Not a dog, not a cat. My guess is that this is a badger. Yeah, a badger, I guess. Yeah, mulberries. A year with very little fruits, and so we forage whatever we can get. I am happy with the quality of those mulberry fruits. Of course, they are official fruiting varieties. Some of them even taste better than the random mulberries grown for their leaves, like those here. But those are definitely of sufficient quality. Lamb's quarters. Good foraging, but here nobody forages it. Instead, they still grow the very closely related and very similar Atriplex hortensis probably. Looks like that, just bigger and more greenish leaves. And here, Sanguisorba minor, or minor. The Germans forage it a lot, but I've never seen anybody in Bulgaria forage and eat it. Okay, no chance to find the herbs I'm looking for around here. I guess I have to go search for them in Driavna, not here. So I'm going back into town to see what they grow in the little gardens surrounding the houses. Some violets growing here. The leaves already are drying up in the summer heat. Nobody around here was eating violets. They are totally edible, but I don't remember anybody eating them. In the French, they even candy the flowers And here more goji berries, not fruiting but flowering right now. A grapevine. This seems to be yes, this is the American fox grape. Rounded leaves, whitish undersides. My grandfather planted American fox grapes for the first time over 40 years ago, and back then you could find them here and there, but they were not the dominant grape varieties. But in Drianovo yesterday I made a video and 80% of the grapes were fox grapes. Here those are not fox grapes. The ones in the garden behind are not fox grapes either, and those are not fox grapes either. Drianovo is not really a grape growing climate. You can grow them, but it's difficult. Around here it's a bit easier, and fox grapes are very good in shady, in wet conditions, in areas with cold winters. So here, despite the fact that we are very close to Drianovo, we are 15 kilometers or like 10 miles downriver, and everything is a little bit warmer and the soil is a little bit more fertile. And you can see here again a cherry plum tree, a big improved variety, very few fruits, but it has fruits. In Drianovo I didn't see, I saw one fruit on one cherry plum, and there the cherry plums are still more or less completely green. Also here, this apple tree has a bunch of really small, not very well developed apples, but it has a couple apples, yeah. So the cold mountain areas got hit harder than the slightly less cold. I wouldn't say, well, Drianovo is not really mountain and Drianovo is not really lowland, but Drianovo is a little bit further into the mountains than Drianovo. Here again, a seedling mulberry. See again, the leaves are more lobed than the ones of the big trees in the mulberry gardens, which were planted from cuttings. They would cut off a 2 meter long stick from the old mulberry tree, take off the leaves, put the leaves in the trays with the silkworms. The worms would eat the leaves, and usually they would use the sticks then as firewood, like as kindling or stuff, but a couple of those sticks they would stick somewhere in the ground and thus create a new mulberry garden. And those leaves are usually more entire, while the seedling leaves are usually more lobed. I don't know why. Let's see what grows around the old clock tower. When I say old, most of the architecture here is most of the old architecture here. Oh, let's see what we have here. Do we have any rare plants growing around, being sold around here? Nope. Mostly still the normal stuff we would find in communist times. Well, when we are talking about old architecture in this area, it's usually 17th, 18th, 19th century. Here we have blue blackberries, species of blue blackberries, probably some rubus caesius version. So yeah, the old architecture here is not really old. There is not much that's older than 300 years here in this area. So we don't really have a lot of medieval stuff, because we just had too many wars and the medieval stuff got pretty much destroyed. Oh, beware of the paint. Okay, unfortunately I don't have a weapon, but yeah, I'm wary. Oregon grape, Mahonia aquifolium, an evergreen from, you guessed it, Oregon and other parts of the US. Grown here as an ornamental, very frost hardy despite being evergreen. But if you cook the fruits, you can actually make a lot of preserves from them. You shouldn't eat them raw. They will disrupt your digestion, but there are certain ways to prepare it. Yeah, I know what they used to use it for. When we were little kindergarteners, the elementary schoolers, they would take some hollow sticks or some other hollow stuff and use them as blowpipes, blow those at us, and then you have to explain your mother why your clothes are full of reddish, blackish spots. And then you said, but the big boys, they blew with those blow darts at us. Yeah, so why did you fight the big boys? We didn't fight the big boys, they just attacked us. Yeah, good times. Here, by the way, Cotoneaster horizontalis. I mean, those will be ripe in summer, where nobody will care about them, but sometimes they ripen in winter or early spring, where there are no other fruits. So they are quite a good resource to know. Also here, I guess this mulberry tree is also feral, because it somehow doesn't make sense to plant another tree here. I mean, nice, it makes shade and everything, but it also has quite entire leaves, which is more typical for mulberry trees from cuttings, but it's not a law, it's kind of a rule of thumb. Here also a relative of the Mahonia. This is Berberis, probably Hematocarpa. Fortunately, one of the barberry species with non-edible fruits. Sumach rustufina. The fruits of those things are the berries are a very popular spice. And yeah, here they are more advanced than in Triavna. In Triavna, they just finished flowering. Here, the young berries are already well developed, not sour yet. Let's try the berries from last year. They are very hairy, dry berries. Still have some sourness, but not much. It's very pleasant sourness, like vitamin C, but you also get those hairs. Usually those fruities, they are being ground into a powder, into a sour powder, which is very popular in some cuisines. Our minority workers are painting the benches, and they are upgrading the city center here. Yeah, so yeah, quite an interesting sour spice, which you can buy in Oriental and other stores, but you can also produce it yourself just by grinding up a couple handfuls of those little berries. Please don't hurt me, Mr. Bulldozer Man. I'm small and harmless. Hibiscus syriacus, probably from Syria, is the national flower of, you guessed it, South Korea. Flowers, fruits, and young leaves and shoots are edible. We ate them as kindergarteners, although the adults told us they are poisonous and we are gonna die. We still ate them, but listen to the adults. They taught us a lot about poisonous stuff, which was really poisonous. Plantain or sycamore trees. This could be the native Platanus orientalis. It's native to warmer parts of Bulgaria, not here. The fruits, where are the fruits? The fruits, as well as the underside of the leaves, are full of itching powder. Well, usually they don't affect people who just walk around, except if you start wallowing here on the ground. But gardeners who have to prune them, or cleaners who have to collect all the dust and litter here, they really load this tree. The Court of Justice. I have business here much too often for my taste, and I'm not even being sued. It's just about finding out where my property, where my real estate in the area is. Those hanging mulberries have become quite popular in Bulgaria, very popular in churchyards, but also in public spaces. They're dwarf form, branches are hanging, and they still produce a couple edible fruits. Let's cross here illegally in front of the Court of Justice. Oops, I'm busted. For centuries in Balkan and Oriental culture, it was considered a good deed to create a drinking fountain. And this is probably quite an old historic one. It's just tap water with chlorine, but still. Rich people used to pay builders to build big fountains, but even the poorest person could get a couple of handfuls of cement and a piece of a pipe, a piece of a water pipe, go somewhere on the roadside or in the forest, find a little rock or cliff where a trickle of water flew down, catch this trickle of water, put the pipe so that the pipe caught the trickle of water, put a little bit of concrete around it, and basically channel everything into the water pipe, and then he created a water fountain at the roadside or in the forest, and so people would remember them forever. This is a standard thing that used to be done here. Also here, this blackberry is the invasive Armenian blackberry. We don't know where it's from, probably from Armenia and surrounding areas. It was found first in a nursery in Hamburg, Germany, with the label that it's from Armenia. It seems genetic studies confirm that it's from the area, but now it's invasive in big parts of Europe, producing a lot of tasty fruits, but yeah, very invasive. A lot of my job is to fight against this invasive plant. Pretty rare in Drianovo, but here it's warmer and milder, so here it's a bit more common. It doesn't like cold weather. Here again, several grapevines, and not a single one of them is the American fox grape. So here they still grow the more traditional grape varieties because they are easier to grow in warm climate. In the mountains, people have given up and replaced them with the hardier fox grape. Also, this fig shrub, which unfortunately will probably, as soon as they repair this rubble wall, it will go away, I guess. It froze down for the last time, I guess, 6 or 7 years ago. They said 7 or 8 years ago in Drianovo they had frost of minus 27 degrees centigrade. That would be how much? It would be somewhere in the negative Fahrenheit degrees. Very cold. So I guess here it was almost as cold, and this froze down to the ground but recovered. There are a bit more fig trees around here. Traditionally we didn't have fig trees in this area. Before climate change it was too cold for fig trees here, and now look at that, there is a bigger one, but the stems are not much thicker, so I guess this one froze down to almost to the ground 7 or 8 years ago. But yeah, those are bigger than the ones you see in Drianovo, because here it's a little bit milder. And in the background again, different grapevines, but not fox grapes. Very big difference here again, not fox grapes. A cherry plum grown as a fruit tree, maybe an improved variety. Firewood being gathered here, well, firewood being stored here. Black locust, plum. This is most probably a field maple. And what is this? Not sure, looks a little bit like an oak. Could be an oak, but could be something different. All of those very heavy, very hard woods, and a lot of them were cut into pieces long after they died. So this is murderous for any chainsaws. It bluntens every chainsaw. And here a piece of beech. So those are all very high quality, very high caloric timbers. The beech is the best actually, but those hardwoods are also very good. They are just much harder to cut than beech. So here they said we don't want to heat with pine or spruce or other such stuff, because you have to feed the oven constantly. But you put in one of those and it will heat you for a long time, because this hardwood burns quite slowly. Yeah, up there different grape spines, not a single fox grape. Here probably this fig shrub is bigger than anyone in Drianovo. Here again grapevines, no fox grapes. Here again a fig tree in this case, also froze down probably once during the last 10 years, but bigger than anything you see in Drianovo. When I was a kid you saw such fig trees mostly along the coast. Even in the lowland areas they would freeze down more frequently. Also the cherries are sick this year. Not only don't they have fruits, but the trees are also sick. And here is an apricot tree. Interesting that down here it has a lot of little leaves. This seems to be a grafted apricot tree. I think it's grafted on some type of plum, because those are plum leaves, those are apricot leaves, or maybe there are some, I mean it's a seedling, they are very variable, but still, this doesn't look like an apricot at all. Tell me if you think this apricot was grafted on a plum tree, or is it just some strange type of apricot? Because up here it totally does look like a standard apricot. In my time, everybody used to have a vegetable garden and a fruit orchard, and in warmer areas also a vineyard, but not in Drianovo. Also look here, not a single fox grape. Here the traditional grape varieties grow better. Now here somebody is still growing tomatoes, but it's not such a common thing anymore. Here another improved cherry plum variety. And by the way, a fig tree here, and again grapes which are not fox grapes. Another fig tree there, and I saw one further back. I didn't show it to you. We have a lot fewer fig trees in Drianovo because they used to freeze down much more. I remember my grandfather had a fig in the garden, but it froze down every year to the ground, and I waited for it every year to produce one single fruit, but nope. It survived for a couple years, but never made it to fruiting. Here again, cherry plum, grapes which are not fox grapes, grapes which are not fox grapes, more grapes which are not fox grapes. Here, a peach tree and a sour cherry. Everything is a bit dusty because of the construction work here, so the leaves don't look too good. Let's see, I think at least also roses. Very popular. Flower gardens were also very popular, and now there are, I think, no fox grapes on any of those plants, and more figs in the background. See, those froze back last winter, or maybe even in spring. The tips are frozen, but the rest survived. Bananas and magnolias have become quite fancy nowadays. Look at that, so many grapevines in the background, not a single one is a fox grape. Here the one in the foreground is a fox grape, the others here are not. So we have fox grapes here, but they are not a mass phenomenon because it seems the more traditional grape varieties survive better here in Drianovo. Now over 80% fox grapes, because the other grapes you have to spray them, you have to fertilize them, you have to prune them a lot. Also my grandfather had some very high quality grape varieties, not so hardy. He used to dig ditches in autumn and put the whole grapevine down into the ditch and bury it with soil for the winter to save it from the winter frosts. I don't think this house. Oh yeah, they are doing some repairs, and I'm sure that the old timber is gonna go for firewood. Old timber which has dried for many decades. It's quite good quality firewood. Here more grapes, a lot of grapevines, a lot more than in Drianovo, and not a single one of all those grapevines. I can see more than 10 different ones here, not a single one is a fox grape. Also, you know what I don't see here in the gardens? I haven't seen a single cornel cherry cultivar. Here more grapevines everywhere, much more than in Drianovo, because the climate is better. Like in Drianovo in the mountains, we have to work our way around the heavy frosts and basically grow such things like fox grapes and cornel cherries, which are not a cherry, they're a completely different plant. Here the climate is much better, and that's why in the last centuries the Muslims settled here. There were never any Turks in Drianovo except 2 or 3 Turkish families working there as farmers, and of course the Turkish boss. I don't know what the town official was called, but down here a lot of Muslim Turks and Muslim Roma who basically took advantage of the better climate, but had no interest in living in the cold Balkan mountains. Which dog is this? I don't know if this is Rumex crispus or Rumex obtusifolius. I guess it's crispus. As a little kid, I had to forage for those dogs, and whenever I came back with the wrong one, which was very bitter, I was in a lot of trouble. Donkey thistle. Donkeys like those things, and actually if you get past the past the horrible spines, the flower heads taste like little artichokes. Also, you know, the tumbleweed in the US called the Russian thistle, which was probably brought, well, from Russia or somewhere else in Eurasia. The donkey thistle, according to some reports, was brought to Bulgaria by the Russian army. They say after the war of, what was it, 1835 or 1850 something, after the Russian army moved through Bulgaria. Those cropped up everywhere. It's possible the Russians brought the seeds. It's also, of course, possible the Russians brought so much destruction that nobody was working the land anymore, and those took over the fields. Look at that, a lot of really beautiful swallowtail butterflies on those. See, here is one, and here is one with a lot brighter color. Beautiful swallowtails, but those thistles are not native. Topinambur growing here. Topinambur is an invasive sunflower from North America, where you don't eat the seeds like in other sunflower species, you eat the tubers. Used to be a very popular potato substitute, and still is, I think, for diabetics, and so you can use it, but yeah, check it, don't rely on my opinion. The river is slightly more polluted than in Driavna, I think. I think it's a little bit more, it has a little bit more nutrients in the water and a little bit more algae and stuff, but it's still very clean. When I was young, a textile factory in Driavna polluted this river to an extent that there was basically no life in it. It was a stinking, lifeless sewer. And every day when they were dyeing their clothes a different color, the river was either red or green or blue. White or yellow didn't work so well. They made some sort of murky color, but red and green and blue and purple were quite well defined colors in the river. Many miles downriver it had those colors. Toxic and stinky and everything. Also, there was a lot of drought when I was young, so the river was probably less than a meter wide. And here now I see, yeah, it is considerably more polluted than in Driavna. Maybe there are still some neighborhoods without proper access to sanitation. But I can see this only by the fact that there is a little bit more algae here. There are water plants, there are plenty of fishes here. You can see every little pebble on the ground. This would have been impossible for many decades in the 20th century. Yeah. Quite high nutrient content when I compare the plants growing along the river with the plants growing along the river 15 kilometers upriver in Driavna. Here are a lot more nitrophilous plants that like very well fertilized areas. But still, I'm not complaining. A big improvement in the last 40 years. Also, as far as I know, fishing, especially in town areas here, is forbidden. Otherwise, with such a plethora of decent-sized fish, there would be lots of fishermen here. Yeah, and despite the fact that they built a lot of supporting walls and so on, I would say the river dynamics are quite okay, and this river is not natural in this area, but it is acceptable. It's really from a lifeless sewer to a transparent water with fish and not just algae, but also other water plants. I'm not complaining at all. I have to catch my train to Driavna. Let's see if we can find something interesting around the train station. Foraging for those things is like Russian roulette. I used to make little water pipes for my constructions as a child from them because they have hollow stems. But there are several species here. Some are edible, some are mildly poisonous, and then there is the hemlock. They all look pretty much exactly the same, very difficult to distinguish. And the hemlock will kill you even in small amounts. So although I know that there are some of those things looking like this which are forageable, I stay away from them because even I as a botanist, I'm not confident of always recognizing them 100. Yeah, you need 100% security with those because they are deadly in small amounts. Here we have something very interesting, the North American pokeweed or polk. This is another highly toxic plant, but you can eat every part of it. Yeah, again, it's a Russian roulette, or rather you could say it's an Appalachian redneck roulette, because only the Appalachian rednecks and of course the Native Americans before them used to eat it. It was introduced to Europe because the berries have a very strong red-purple dye. Oh, look at that! Those people, they admire the fish. Yeah, in those towns it was always like this. We would admire the fish, but nobody would dare to go fishing here because, yeah, the cops would chase you. They wanted those rivers full of fish and people admiring them. I think fishing was allowed in some areas, but not in the urban areas, and it seems that still people admire them. Look at the fish, look at the nice fish, so tasty, but people don't fish for them. Yeah, so pokeweed. There is even a song, Poke Salad Annie or Yenny, about the poor woman who could afford nothing but this stuff. Yeah, what did they, or what do they eat in Appalachia? Actually, I ate a couple dishes from this year and I survived, and they were tasty enough, to be honest. Around here in Bulgaria, in some areas, they use the leaves to wrap meat or rice balls in them and cook them and eat the leaves with them. You can make a spinach out of the leaves, and before the stems turn red, you can actually peel the stems and also cook them. They are not a bad vegetable, not a very strong taste, but the plants get pretty big, so you can get a lot of mass with not too much effort. So yeah, it is an edible vegetable, but you are playing with your life when you are eating it. It has a whole cocktail of poison. Some of them you can taste, some of them you can feel immediately, some of them will hit you later. So if you are not a Native American of the old Southeast, of the old South, or some redneck hillbilly from the Appalachian Hills, better stay away from it. Yeah, that's a good piece of advice for me and for all Appalachian redneck hillbillies and Native Americans of the old South. Yeah, thumbs up and tell me how this stuff tastes for you. See those giant dandelions here? They are not dandelions, but a relative of them, and another quite easy way to get quite big pieces of vegetable to munch on. A bit too old, and it was a bit too dry here. Very slightly bitterish and a little bit tough, but still totally enjoyable. Because of the warm climate, there should be ambrosia on this train station. Another invasive American plant, which is the most allergenic plant in the world. And yeah, it's spreading along those railroads. We are still quite early in the year, but I should be able to see small seedlings. Some nice old big sycamore trees, over a meter thick. In southern Bulgaria, you can find trees well over 5 meters thick. Well, this is probably 1.5, closer to 2 meters big tree. But yeah, the wild ones are much bigger. And here again, the polk from close up. Already the stem turning bloody red. The stems are already too tough, so I would forage neither the stem nor the leaves nor anything at this time of the year. The very distinct berries are already formed. Actually, when I go back to Germany, I have to continue. My most urgent job is to continue the eradication of the polkweed in the Heidelberg forests. We've done a lot of work during the last weeks. Also, my girls are continuing the work while I'm on holidays in Bulgaria. And when I come back, I have to finish it. Yeah, not edible anymore. Nope. By the way, those things have giant tubers that look like beets or giant radishes. The biggest one we ever dug out with pickaxes and axes and spades, and with this is one of the most back-breaking jobs I ever have. The biggest ones were like, the biggest root or tuber I dug out was like 25 kilograms. I bet there are even bigger ones out there, but I'm gonna get them all. Oh, once wrote a publication on this tiny thing. I even forgot the name. All the train stations along this line were built basically by the same design, by the same standard. I mean, makes sense. You don't have to pay an architect to design every train station separately. But unfortunately, the name is usually only on the train station itself. And when we are traveling, especially at night, you are falling asleep, you are very tired, but you have to wake up all the time and check, is any one of those identical looking train station your train station or not? Actually, once I almost missed my train station in Trevna and had to jump out when the train was moving pretty fast already in the middle of the night. Yeah, I dragged a big trail of blood home on that night. But yeah, beware of the identical train station in the Central Balkan line. Also, getting a ticket can be sometimes a bit of a... Oh, they are here. This morning in Trevna I had to look for them in the park. Здравейте, един до Тревна, моля. Сега влака кога е в 12:15? Мерси. Колко беше? 2 лева ли беше? Да. You are in luck. We have 30 more minutes, so let's forage on the daylilies. Very tasty edible stuff. Well, the flowers are kind of sweet and spicy and hot and delicious and yeah, good stuff. Also, yeah, car tires are commonly being used in landscaping in Bulgaria. Firstly, you put them around the fruit trees in public parks because the minorities with their weed whackers, they whack away at anything, but the tire usually is enough to protect the young fruit trees. Also painted landscaping, like if you had a lot of money, you will probably make this from some fancy stones, but here they make them from painted tires. I'm a little bit, yeah, I'm not too comfortable with this because, yeah, it looks nice, it's creative, it's working with what you have, but on the other hand, tires and the paint, they all release microplastics and micro rubber and other stuff and pollute the area. Better to have them somewhere far away in the recycling plant or the landfill. However, if you consider all the dirt, remember those little towns used to be industrial towns without proper filtration systems and air filters and water filters and anything. Also, the railroad used to use a lot of toxins. Also, a lot of toxins used to be transported on the railroad and dripping down everywhere. So those areas, the towns were heavily polluted. The surrounding hills and mountains, a lot less so, but in the towns, the air pollution was crazy. Air was almost unbreathable in winter, in smog conditions. The water pollution, I told you the river was basically dead. The soil, especially near the factories, I've seen people grown stuff in soil which basically didn't even belong on the landfill, but belonged somewhere in the toxic disposal, high security facilities. They were growing tomatoes inside. So I guess for them, a couple tires and a bit of paint are not a big problem, especially you must consider those tires are just lying around and decomposing slowly. But all the tires on the road, why do you think you have to replace your tires every couple years? Well, because all the rubber gets rubbed off literally. So yeah, tires on driving cars create a lot more pollution than tires in some little town park. So it is kind of a problem, but not a serious one. Acer pseudoplatanos, the mountain maple or sycamore, or I think they also call it Norwegian maple. This is actually the sugar maple of Europe. Not so important around here, but in high mountains and in Nordic areas, this was tapped for sugar, like in the Alps, in Russia, in Scandinavia, and so on. Very important survival plant because you tap it in spring when you have used up all your supplies from last autumn, and then the sugar sap, yeah, full of clean water, nice sugar, a lot of vitamins and minerals and stuff that gave you a boost to start the year. Also you would let your cattle graze underneath those trees in the Alps and other high mountains. There are still areas with those sycamore trees. Often you would cut down the young branches and use the leaves as hay, as fodder for the animals, so they would eat the grass in summer. They would eat the young twigs of the sycamore in winter. In spring you would tap it for the sap. In autumn you could also eat the ripe fruits. Let's see if there are some unripe fruits around here or some from last year. You could eat the seeds of the ripe fruits. They are big enough. They are not good quality food, but they are food. And also the timber inside has very nice patterns. So you could use the timber inside those things for the timber is very high quality and very expensive, and so unfortunately a lot of those old trees are being cut down just for the timber. However, in Bulgaria this was not a big problem, but for decades cutting down old walnut trees was a big problem because people, well, this is a young one, but people would cut down their old walnut trees, their own walnut trees illegally. You are not allowed to cut old walnut trees. They would steal other people's walnut trees. For decades they would all go to Germany for the gun butt production because this stuff is self-lubricating and it doesn't warp. I mean, imagine on a battlefield or hunting in the forest, you hit the butt of your gun everywhere. You have a lot of different temperatures, like when you shoot it heats up, when it's cold outside it cools down, you get it wet. You need this non-warping. The timber is soft, but you need this non-warping, self-lubricating timber. Back then, they said a small piece of good quality walnut timber in Germany, you could get a Bulgarian month's salary for it. So I've seen people cut down walnut trees much thicker than a meter. Fortunately, my walnut trees survived this, but not everybody else's did. Oh, plantain, Plantago lanceolata, being eaten a lot in a lot of countries, but in Bulgaria, at least in our areas, this was never a tradition. Also here we have finally Rumex obtusifolios. See, the leaves are not as crispy, are not as wavy as Rumex crispus, and they are more blunt shaped, and if I tried those, they would be bitter, while the leaves of Rumex crispus, at least the young ones, would be slightly sour, like the closely related sorrel. Don't forage this, your mom will yell at you. You could forage this, Plantago major, just as edible as Plantago lanceolata. Both can also be used to stop bleeding on wounds. However, we never used them here, we didn't know that. We used yarrow, and I cannot find yarrow anywhere for my teacher. Sorry, teacher. Yep, a nice old water fountain. Oh, one of them even working. Nice. Well, two are better than one, but of course one is infinitely better than none. Again, chlorinated tap water. It's not spring water, but I'm not complaining. Good for drinking and good for, yeah, here in the hills and even high up in Travna and even high in the mountains. Sunny summer days are very hot. The nights can be very cold, but the days, they will hit you with almost similar temperatures to the lowlands. Although less humidity. The lowlands now in summer, they are insufferable in Bulgaria. Here the days can be just as hot but less humid as in the lowlands, but in the lowlands often the heat at night stays above 30 degrees centigrade. That's like what, in the 90s Fahrenheit, and very high air humidity. And so a lot of the lowland people come up here and buy houses to spend the summer here because it's insufferable in the lowlands. But even here, the summer days are hot, only the nights are cold. Dandelion, I had to forage this for my mother, but I always refuse to eat it, too bitter. But if you want bitter, the wild chicory is even more bitter. There are cultivars which are less bitter, where you eat the young buds or leaves. And there are cultivars where you roast the bitter root and make coffee from it. Chicory coffee was the main coffee drunk around Europe and most of the, well, large parts of the world before 1950, because real coffee was too expensive for most people. Oh, how could I have forgotten the linden or lime trees? They are being planted everywhere in Bulgaria. They grow fast, they make shade, they are beautiful. The timber is very soft, but can be used for wood carving and making spoons and bowls and everything. So they were very important for the woodworking industry here, and still are. But of course now in June they are flowering, the air is smelling. It's a similar smell to citrus flowers, but similar but a little bit different. And of course around June we used to forage for the flowers. The flowers are wonderful. You can make such a great tea from them. Yeah, you would you would climb on the tree and either pick the flowers one by one or just chop down branches and then pick the flowers on the ground. Usually, well, if you have animals, they could eat the branches, or you could collect the branches, bring them home, even with the flowers, and then store them somewhere. Then in winter you could pick the flowers, make tea from them, and give the branches with the leaves to your animals, and so you would have tea and fodder collected at once. What else do we have here? Fruit trees. Bulgarians would plant fruit trees everywhere. Only in Sofia, in the more sophisticated parts of Sofia, around the communal blocks, fruit trees were frowned upon. But in the suburbs of Sofia, even around the communal blocks, they planted fruit trees. But in socialist times, around city communal blocks, nah, we are not a village here, we don't need this. In the 90s, they found out they totally needed fruit trees and other stuff for survival when the communist system broke down. What are those grapes? Fox grapes. I think this is the third fox grape plant we found here. So here, only 15 kilometers, but the proportions are reversed. 80% Vitis vinifera varieties and 20% fox grapes or Vitis, what is it, Musoniana or something varieties. In Drianovo, just 15 kilometers away from here, but slightly colder, it's 80% fox grape and 20% other varieties. Although 40 years ago, probably Drianovo had a similar proportion as here. Over there, a couple honey locusts. The giant fruits are like over 30 centimeters or a foot long. So are unfortunately also the giant thorns. The fruits are edible, thus honey locusts, but usually you get them in a bad stage and then they taste horribly. This roller standing around here. Also yesterday I saw a coffee shop in a small park in Drianovo, and they left their tables and chairs unchained outside. Also big flower pots with valuable plants, like with valuable palms and olives. Well, valuable, they cost a couple dozen euros probably a piece. They were not chaining them, they were not guarding them. In my time, they wouldn't have survived. People would have stolen this roller within 5 minutes. And if they couldn't steal it, they would just smash it to bits, and then somebody would steal the bits. Times have changed a lot. When I was young, you didn't leave anything outside which had any value. Even if this pipe, look at that, this pipe is so loose, I could basically break it off. Somebody would have, well, probably they did break parts of it off, and you would bring it to a place that bought scrap metal and would collect maybe enough money to buy a small beer. Yeah, made your day and destroyed the parapet of this little park for everybody else. But yeah, nowadays the times are a lot more peaceful and a lot more prosperous than when I was young. Let's see, the old grannies are complaining there are no benches. I guess all the benches got stolen in my time or destroyed. Look at that Chelidonium maius, a very dangerous plant, see? It has orange milky sap. One of the main rules of foraging is stay away from everything with white milky sap, except if you know it's edible, and stay away from everything with yellow, orange or reddish milky sap. Chelidonium maius has this orange milky sap, and it's so corrosive, so toxic, that it will burn your skin. It will burn your skin so well that it will burn warts. It will burn off warts completely. A wart is basically an irregular growth of skin, several millimeters thick. This would burn through several millimeters of calluses on those warts and destroy the base, the living base of the wart. Very toxic stuff. Now if I touch my eye, I could have to go to the eye doctor, so never touch it. I rubbed it off here, and I will go and also wash my fingers now. Yeah, beware of anything with orange or any milky sap. And folks, this was the foraging in the beautiful little foothill town, not really mountain or hill town, of Drianovo. I forgot to mention that they also have more limestone here, while in Triavna it's more sandstone. Well, it's a sandy limestone here and the limey sandstone in Triavna. But anyways, this is my train. So folks, stay tuned for a lot more fruit videos from the beautiful and right now incredibly fruit poor due to the April frost mountain towns of Bulgaria. And of course, don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe.